a thrill for me to have Craig Foster here on our show. He's just adjusting his camera because he's going to show you folks today, and I'm going to describe for our audio listeners, keys to make sure you don't miss putts from close range. And I saw, Craig, an unreal statistic from Steve Elkington about how he went for a year without missing a putt inside of 3 feet. Crazy stuff. So welcome to our show. Tell us about you, please.
Thanks, Mark. Great to speak with you. I am in Olympia, Washington, state capital. I'm about 20 minutes south of Chambers Bay, and I'm in my shop. I've been in the golf club business for over 35 years, and 10 of those were with the original Ben Hogan Company. I was the Northwest
background there.
Warranty, lots of memorabilia here, and I was the Northwest Warranty Regional Warranty Center for Ben Hogan Company for 10 years, 87 to 97. And then, so that was quite the education. And growing up, I played all sports. I was a quarterback, football, catcher, baseball, but we were a tennis family. My mother played competitively when she was young. And so we were tennis family. I was the number one tennis player on my high school team. I played golf, but I was the number one tennis player, and I couldn't beat my older brother, but I also could not beat my mother in tennis when I was the number one player, and she was really tough. And so I may or may not have broken a racket or two in frustration there. But anyway, I played a little tennis in college, and then I subbed on the golf team just one time. It wasn't my major sport. I didn't get golf fever until Larry Nelson won the PGA at Atlanta Country Club, and that was really inspirational for me because he wasn't a child prodigy. It didn't come up through junior. He was a late bloomer in golf, and so that was inspirational, showing that it could be done later in life. So I really started focusing on golf then. And I was always in our repair shop in our town was run by a man that came from Fort Gordon, went to Augusta, worked in the only golf shop in Augusta back in the early days, Bernie Porter's. This is before tour vans. And he moved to our town. And so I was always in his shop getting something done and tinkering. And when he retired, he asked me if I would like to be involved in the business. And so he started helping me, and I learned how to work on clubs, and then was eventually started working with Ben Hogan Company. And so I just loved golf. I just played golf all the time, this main focus. And I developed a severe case of the yips when I was in my early 30s. And so it was just devastating for me because I was afraid to play with others. And also at this time, I was trying to learn to hit the ball farther, like a lot of people do. And as Bryson said on your show, you have to be careful when you're doing this, because you can injure yourself. And I severely injured my left wrist with impingement, end range motion. And so I was out of golf for 2 years, just devastated, couldn't hit balls. So, but the good that came out of that is I went to a hand specialist in Seattle, and I learned about the bones, and through physical therapy, just learned about motion and in the wrists and bones. And so when I got the yips, because I was in the club business, I'm working on clubs every day, thinking about things. And one thing that Ben Hogan talked about was during his waggle and the raised wrist bone at impact. So, I'm thinking about all these mechanical things. And I'd also had a history of auto mechanics. I worked on race cars for a number of years. These are NHRA supercharged dragsters I was in with owners there. And so I was familiar with taking engines apart, putting them back together every week. So I had this mechanical background, and it just rolled around in my mind some way to control this motion. We have so much freedom of motion that allowed the yips, and I couldn't cure yips any of the traditional ways. So that's how I ended up going to, with mechanics, you have to take out the torque and the moving parts, the front end of your car, you have to align the wheels so you're not making adjustments just to drive straight, obvious stuff. And so I figured out this way to stabilize. We're going to soft end range motions. And
that's, what, it's fascinating just to camp out on the Yips thing for a little while, because I'm certain there are folks listening to this that are struggling with that, where you get over a 2-3 foot putt and the hole looks like a thimble and you can't get the putter going. And yes, it's largely mental, but the origin of the thing is a mechanical flaw. That's essentially what you're telling the listeners right now.
Yes, the central nervous system is sending out signals to the muscles to do something, and those signals get jumbled. And if you have the range of motion, then these signals just get crossed and your motor response gets crossed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so yes, and I don't have the Yips anymore, so well, needless to say.
You've obviously got people's attention, and you got my mind spinning, as most of my really super intelligent guests do. You mentioned Bryson. He's been on the show. He talked about the end of range motion. You've essentially you've applied this to your putting mechanics with Dynalign for the longest time, before Bryson was even Bryson. But the thing that was fascinating to me about your approach, which really piqued my attention, because as an instructor, I'm very big on proper alignment. You take dead aim if you're Harvey Pinnock kind of thing. And I find so many golfers, well, first they misread the greens, but that's an aside. And then they just aim their rifle badly. They aim the putter head poorly, and then they're having to compensate throughout the stroke. And they wonder why they're missing. Where your theory is you stabilize the body and the muscles and the bones and the wrist and such first. And then once you've got that, then you've got the stable base around which to operate the well-aligned putter. Am I summarizing that well enough?
It's exactly right. And what you see on tour, a lot of the players aim the putter first, and then they'll build a stance around it. And you'll notice when they do that, they're all extremely careful about completing their grip and their stance, because they don't want to disturb the alignment of the putter face, which they've already locked in. And to me, that's just evidence of a fragile system. I mean, why do you have to be so careful? So we go into motion, and we're more like the archer. The archer doesn't take final aim until they draw the bow. So, we draw the bow, get everything stabilized, and then we take our final aim. So it's just exactly the opposite. And
now, you've mentioned one error that you see. I want to get a few more, because everyone listening to this is like, right, I want to make those money putts. I want to make the putt to beat my buddy on the final hole, blah, blah, whatever it might be, club championship. Hey, if they're tour pros listening to it, that one Friday afternoon or on Sunday afternoon, the important ones. The mistakes that you've seen in all of your years coaching putting, obviously you talk about just being badly situated physically. What other sort of mistakes do you see that putters make, sort of in a general sense, as people approach trying to make putts?
Well, I think it's part of it is trying to guide the putt down a line at a certain speed, because we know those two are connected and they're two separate subjects. And so as an example, if you have a downhill left to right fast breaking putt, and you know that it's common for players, as they're making their stroke, maybe give it a little extra left, maybe give it a little extra right. And at that point, they've totally forgotten about the distance control, because your mind can only focus on one thing, and it's switching focus back and forth. And it takes a brief moment to reconfigure to go to the new subject. So with Dynalign, once we get our alignment, we're confident in our start line. And so we're thinking really solely of distance and application of force during the stroke.
I love that, because, I'm preaching that all of the time, because the read that you make of the green, that is reliant on the appropriate speed, because if you can make the perfect read, if the speed is off, then you're missing putts.
Absolutely. Yes.
All right. Let's dive into it. And I'll start like this. I've got various putting lessons through my career, and then I've passed some of these on to players. And the one I actually got from Paul Azinger, and you know Zinger well, you know, all of these legends of the game. And he used to really palm the hands up to the sky. And for the folks who are watching this on YouTube, you'll get a demonstration now. If you're listening, Paul would hold the putter sort of palms underneath the club, so his palms are looking up. And then he'd sort of wrap the fingers around lightly, and the thumbs wouldn't be completely on the top of the shaft. They'd sort of be to the side a little bit. And that essentially locks the wrists in position. Another version is Steve Stricker with the ulnar deviation, where he pops that lead wrist bone up, kind of like Ben Hogan, and then locks in the stroke, and both of them incredible under pressure. Talk to us about the concepts around the wrist bones and such that you apply with Dynalign, please.
Yes, and the Azinger technique, this is basically Paul Runyon, Jackie Burke, Corey Pavin, and they are locking down the wrists. And Paul Runyon even used that in chipping very effectively. And so what you're doing, you're stabilizing motion in the wrists and in the forearms. That's the radius and ulna bones there in the forearms. So we're stabilizing that. But, you know, we have 12 major joints involved in this. We have ankles, hips, knees, shoulders, elbows, and wrists. So if you're doing this, okay, fine for the wrist part, but you know, we have range of motion every place else in the system. And so we're taking care of those joints as well. So the other methods are partial methods, and they can certainly work, because this is a really good one. The Azinger, Jackie Burke technique. It's
the tip of
really,
the spear, if you will.
It really is good, but we go much farther and involve all the joint. And in fact, we have 12 of the 13 major joints that are stabilized by soft end range motion or opposing pressures. And then that leaves the 13th major joint, which is the neck joint, stabilized so much. We're stabilized in our system, so the neck joint can't raise up during the stroke. If you're standing square, you have a square stance, and you're putting this way, if you raise your hand up, you'll pull your trail shoulder out. So with our system, we're stabilized so that we can, when we make the putting stroke, our head can do pretty much anything, and it just doesn't have the influence over the rest of the joints.
You now have everyone's attention. so I'm listening to you now like I'm a fan. I'm a player, and I'm like, here we go. I'm never going to miss from inside 5 feet again. How about we do this? Oh no, I'm interrupting. Sorry. Can we sort of start from the ground up, and you just speak about each of one of those joint systems, and how we can lock them into place?
Okay, sure. If I can demonstrate here, I've got a pointer on this putter, magnetic point. Can you see that, Mark? Are you able to?
And for the folks on the audio, I'll describe this as well as I can. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll start with just square stance with my thumbs down the top of the grip, very traditional. This is maybe Cam Smith style, where he does everything by the book, and just a fabulous putter. Right. Okay, but our range of motion is extreme. We have, everything is in play here. Knees, ankles. And on longer putts, our hips are coming involved typically because we're adding so much force to this that there's going to be motion in there. And so when we go through our system, we are winding forward here. This goes back to Abe Mitchell, the little golfer on the top of the Ryder Cup, who was one of the longer hitters in his day, the coach for Sam Ryder. And one of his principles was winding forward towards the target. And I didn't know about this when I developed Dynalign, but Abe Mitchell would wind forward. He would wind forward towards the target. And he was one of the longer hitters in those days. So I found that out later. But so to answer your question, when we go through our routine, we do have a bit of an open stance, but it's a runner's stance. This goes back to Jackie Burke, where I can push off with my feet. I have pressure available there if I want it, if I need it. And so when we get in the address position, I have the runner's stance, a little bit of an open stance, and that provides pressure up the legs into the hips. And the open stance allows us to rotate our torso back clockwise against that open stance. So that's providing stability in the hip joints for the torso. And then our winding forward, this is involves the shoulder joint, elbow joint, wrist joint, and hand joint. So we get the stabilization for the arms and hands from that. So we have ankles, knees, hips, shoulders, elbows, wrists, and that provides a stable arc.
Yeah, I just want to interrupt there for a second for our audio folks. People, check it out on YouTube. You must go check out YouTube or go to my website, markimmelman.com. To best describe this, I'm sort of seeing your feet and your legs sort of look a little bit like Jack Nicklaus in his heyday, little open to the target, right trail foot sort of square to the line, lead foot turned slightly open. And then the thing that struck me is how both knees are sort of right over the ankles. It's almost like you got your legs splayed out a little bit, in contrast to an old Palmer that would have had those knees squeezed in. And then you've rotated your torso against that. So you open with your feet and close with your chest. And the arm, the way the lead shoulder and the elbow and the wrist looks, in many respects to me, Craig, looks like a Bryson DeChambeau with that super long arm lock putter that he uses.
Yes, and that's a good, I'm glad you brought that up, because I do have the, I call these the exoskeletal putters.
All right.
And with
forearm.
And with Bryson he's using opposite rotation in the upper arm and lower arm. And so he has a lot of stability here. You know, he's eliminating variables, going to end range.
Mm-hmm.
And so he uses a square stance, and he's also going straight back, straight through with his stroke, which does require a little wrist manipulation. And then on longer putts, he will open up his stance to give room for this to go through. But what he doesn't have, in my opinion, that we do have in Dynalign is this ability to really stop the torso from rotating with a square stance. We don't have that ability to rotate the torso counterclockwise against that to provide stabilization. So there is, in my opinion, he's a little bit vulnerable to torso rotation.
Mm-hmm. And you know what I love too, you know, I'm just watching you, and again, I implore the folks to go to YouTube to check this out. It looks locked in, for lack of a better descriptor. Physically, you look locked in, and then you build on this. The way the torso is rotated against, in contrast to the lower body, and the way the lead arm is looked, it almost looks to my observation that your eye line is never going to get too far awry and not parallel with that target line, which is an error I see so many golfers make, where their eyes are going is not jiving with where the intended line of passage of the golf ball is.
I think this helps having the head is behind the ball a little bit, mm-hmm. and we can rotate our head and see down the line.
Yeah.
And this was similar with Jack Nicklaus, and to be able to see down the line. It really keeps this vision in your field of vision, so that you're aware of where you're going, what you're doing.
So in terms of setting these angles up, you know, as we're going through the joints, it appears to me when you go through your routine, as you're demonstrating, that you lock up the wrist and the lead forearm first, then you open your stancer whisker, and then you tilt your spine and rotate it a little bit. Is that sort of the order you go through?
You're a great student. I wish my students would be so observant. Yes, you're really exactly right. And you know, we lockdown. I don't like to use the term lockdown, because we are soft tissue, and locking down. There's a difference between hard end range and soft end range, and hard end range is where you can injure yourself, and that's what we want to avoid. We're going to soft end ranges with these motions. And I've used the various measurement devices that are out there now with being able to measure your wrist motion. And I think I don't think it's a good idea to try to lock this stuff down, because, you're chasing, you don't have to have it perfect. You don't have to zero out all the numbers on the machines and everything, because once you're in this very stable position, you do have slight ability to have some motion. You'll see putting strokes that they just look beautiful and perfect. There's a little stuff going on in there that you cannot see.
Yeah.
So I don't like to use lockdown. It's a little bit too extreme.
Well, I appreciate that personally, because when I've called Bryson a lot when I'm out there on course announcing, and his looks like there is no variability in any of those soft tissue areas. I mean, it is mechanical looking. It's almost wooden, where then you see great field putters where there's a little play in the wrists and there's maybe a little rotation in the body, just especially on the longer stuff where you need to generate a bit more energy towards the club head.
It's absolutely right. Think of Ben Crenshaw, moving his knees and during the stroke, and that's exactly what we have available. We're synchronized. Instead of being locked down, we're synchronized. So when one part moves, when one segment moves, all segments move in coordination. And that brings up another point, is that Dynalign is really only the beginning of what this type of system can do as far as controlling face angle at impact. Right. That's the name of the game. It doesn't matter any golf shot. And so with our basic putting technique, and we're feeling motion here, we can expand that. I don't want to go into this here, but we can expand this to much more than just putting.
Well, I'm sure. I mean, I'm sure this could work especially very well greenside. So many folks have just so much motion going on now in short range shots. I want to talk about, like you've talked about, the mechanics of the hub of the motion, the torso and such. In terms of the path of the putter head now, yes, face angle is the king. I'm very much that way inclined throughout the bag. Talk about the pattern of the stroke. You referenced Bryson, the straight back, straight through, which required some manipulation. This, to me, the way your torso is rotated, looks like it would create a natural arc. And for those folks that sort of tend to swing outward going back, they're going to have that worked out pretty fast, right?
Exactly. And because our range of motion is limited, so now I'm on a stable arc, and I can take my thumbs off, my fingers basically off this. I have pressure in the last 3 fingers of my lead hand. This is Jackie Burke. And then the putter travels on a stable arc. And if I try to push it outside, I feel pressure up here in my chest. If I try to pull it inside, I feel pressure up here, because we're on this arc path. And if I'm trying to go outside of that, my body resists that. So, and which really allows us to have very light grip pressure. We have pressure in the last 3 fingers of the lead hand. My trail hand, my dominant hand, can remain extremely relaxed, because that's where we're going to apply force with our dominant hand, which we use for rolling, tossing balls all of our life. This is our best player. And rather than take the hands out of the stroke, that's taking the best player out during crunch time. The coach would be fired. We want this is our player right here.
So with this being said, folks who use the pencil grip and the saw grip and all these trail hand mitigating sort of techniques, if you get set up Dynalign wise, you don't have to worry too much about that trail hand overpowering the lead side.
Exactly. We have so much stabilization on the lead side that it's much more difficult for the trail side to knock that out of alignment.
Because of the way the forearm's rotated and the way that wrist is popped a little bit. I mean, you're essentially locking that forward arm into, again, wrong word locking, but you're stabilizing that forward arm.
Yes, and you'll see this extremely weak looking lead hand grip on a number of players, I noticed it with Zach Zaltouris. He's got this this lead wrist really rotated in a weak position, and that's dealing with the wrist, but not anything else. But
well, that weak position too, like you think of Zalatoris and how the issues he's had is that the stroke pace is errant, and the path travels back so far inwards that there's a reaction from there, and a number of putts under pressure are struck toward the toe. With that weaker lead side, that also will help to straighten off the path a little bit if you struggle with a counter to taking it outside too much.
yes, it's just very difficult to deviate significantly from that stable arc once you stabilize all the rest of the system.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
Yeah, well, it makes a lot of sense as I watch you. We've talked about the lead hand. We talk about the trail hand a little bit now, and you talked about how the pressure in the lead hand is through the last three fingers, the pinky, the ring finger, and the middle finger. How about the right hand for the right hand as the trail hand? Is there pressure placed through the fingers there? Talk to me about that.
I look at that as if I'm holding a golf ball in my trail hand and I'm rolling that golf ball to the hole. So the pressure would tend to be, if you're holding a ball and rolling, in your thumb, index, and middle finger. This is, you'd hold a ball to throw it. And so that tends to be where my feel is. And so I have a little bit of, a little bit of thumb pressure, a little bit of index, a little bit of middle finger there. And then the other thing about this is that I use a traditional overlap grip rather than a reverse overlap grip, because that puts my pinky of my trail hand on top of the index finger of my lead hand. And for my trigger, I just squeeze my pinky. It's like squeezing the trigger on a gun. You don't pull the trigger. For marksmen, they squeeze the trigger. So when I'm ready to go, my trigger is squeezing that pinky, and that sets off the chain reaction. We've got the triangle is really stabilized and together. And when the trail hand pinky is on the lead hand, that puts it in control of the lead hand. So it's dominant over the lead hand. And then, so that just, it really simplifies things, and it's something that you've done all your life, is this.
Now,
Roll ball.
I'm so liking what I'm hearing right now. You're doing a beautiful job of describing it for our audio listeners. Let's just make this functional now. Let's make this practical. So folks are in a correct position. They're set up, and the areas are isolated. We've reached soft end range motion. Then is practice as simple as lining up like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 footers and just going and getting used to the sensation. And then I guess you're going to have to really pay attention to your reads, because the ball's going to come out differently to what you're used to seeing likely.
I think it's very consistent on your start line. And so you do have, it puts a lot of responsibility on your read. And also, players have aim biases where it's typical to have a right aim bias, a left aim bias. So you really have to have that under control. And whether you use a line on the ball, which I recommend using a line on the ball for a lot of people. Some people don't like it, and that's fine. It depends on.
It's because it looks wrong to them, right? I mean, they set it down and that line doesn't look right, and then they're like all flummoxed. It's crazy. I mean,
yeah.
Anyway.
Yes, players will do that, and my experience and the feedback that I get from players, when I recommend using a line, they say, "Well, it doesn't look right," and so then I change my mind and I tell them, I said, it's right. Get used to that. Train yourself, because I think before I got into the golf club business, I didn't know what square looked like off of a club face. But after measuring it and getting used to it, I think you can train your eye to see what is square with magnetic putters or lasers to see what, because it's interesting. Back in the wooden club days, the typical wooden clubs, the face angle on drivers was typically 2 degrees open, because a square face looked hooked to the good players. The Tony Penna clubs were extremely open. They were 4 or 5 degrees open face, because and the better players were hookers, and so they didn't want to look down at a square face. And so when I learned that, when I started studying golf club design, it just really blew my mind, because I thought, my gosh, you have a 2-degree open face and you think that's square. How can you get consistency if you're training yourself to see that as square? So
you know what, but a lot of that too comes with, you talk about those biases. It's, a slicer of the golf ball is going to aim left naturally. A hooker is going to do the opposite. And I've always loved the fact, and I sort of see that a little bit with you, because Dynalign allows the face and the forearm to basically be one and the same. So as you make your arcing stroke, the face is going to swing a whisker open, and it's going to swing shut, and it's going to release on the way through. So you won't, even if the face were a touch open, it sort of allows some of that as you're watching the pointer on your face there. It's not pointing at the target at the top of its backswing.
Absolutely not. And I think that it does confuse players because they're looking down at this face and they think, well, it's opening. It's not opening to the path. And that's because we're at this, we're on the inclined plane. So when we look down, it appears to be opening. But if you were at 90 degrees and this is coming back, the face is remaining square to that plane. So, my experience is that once you get familiar with this and get comfortable with this, I never look at that face angle, and I'm never worried about it being open to anything. It's just not even in my conscious, because I'm focusing at that point on just delivering force. This is during the stroke.
Yeah.
I'm nothing about alignment. It's all force application at that point.
That simplifies things so much, doesn't it? I mean, you've got the face operational, and so the rest of it just becomes speed, which is the most important element. As I'm sort of bouncing around this thing here a little, I want to ask you about different styles of putter. I mean, people will go to a center shafted putter or an offset putter or a heel shafted. Talk to us a little bit about how Dynalign and different putter styles works.
Okay, I feel if you know how to putt, you can putt with anything.
He's got a very bent shafted putter in his hand right now.
Okay, yeah, I call this is the acid test putter.
Okay. And
this wasn't bent in anger. I specifically bent this to make certain that it would fit no one.
Okay.
and so it,
I researches his stuff.
Terrible. The lie angle is wrong. Everything is wrong. And so if I'm going to set up the putt with this, going through my routine and get my stable arc, and then aim the arc, and
he makes it.
I'm controlling the face angle. So, okay, and having said that, there are face balance putters, toe hang putters, and the conventional system now is to match up a player's stroke profile with the the balance of the torque in the putter, because torque is created with face balanced. I've got a face balanced here. Face balance sounds like a really good idea. When you put it in the playing position, put it into motion.
One sec. For face balanced folks who don't understand what face balanced is, if you balance the putter on top of your forefingers, and when it just lays across your forefingers, the face is going to look at the sky. The toe isn't going to droop. The more the toe of the club droops down, the more it's a toe hang putter. That largely will promote an opening and shutting thing, where a face balanced putter keeps the face more square, something that what Craig is sharing with his technique guarantees that.
Well, actually, I want to go a little bit further with this, just since you mentioned it. So the face balance, when you do put it into motion in the playing position, the center of gravity is away from the center of the axis of the shaft. So gravity is pulling on the center of gravity, and that opens the face. That's torque. Right. And the player senses that as weight. You sense torque, the gravity pulling on that. And then with toe hang putter, it's the same. It's a different degree of torque, but it has torque in it. Mm-hmm. And then there are the putters that I prefer are the toe up balanced putters.
The axis putter. Yeah.
This is the axis. This is the Justin Rose model putter that I prefer. And so they're patented to have the center of gravity in the axis of the shaft in line and in the center of the striking face. So when you put this putter into motion, it doesn't open up.
Yeah.
And so it's just one more variable to get rid of. And it allows you, with the putters that have torque, you can certainly putt well with those, and players do. It requires a little bit more grip pressure to prevent that opening and closing, and that robs your feel for distance. So that's why I prefer these putters, because I can have the lightest grip possible, and that face will not, gravity's not pulling on it.
I gotcha. Hmm.
So,
very interesting. Well, you're going to have folks thinking about the equipment they use too, because I find so many people when they choose putters, and I'm going to let you advise them now too, given that I believe we've sort of touched on the technique. People just, oh, I picked up that putter because Justin Rose has been putting well with the thing, or I picked up that putter because Jason Day is making putts all over the world. I mean, that TaylorMade Spider for the longest time was being used by all and sundry because of the way Day was putting.
Players change putters all the time, looking for different feels, and there's a honeymoon effect where you can putt better. And but I like the quote, Bob Charles quote. Left-handed, used a bullseye putter all his life. He said, "Why would I need extra MOI on my putter?"
It's true. Oh. This is true. Hey, I want to ask this. I'm sure there's going to be one or two naysayers that listen to this, and I say one or two. And I want to ask this for them. The folks are going to listen to everything that you say and maybe watch this footage on YouTube or my website or whatever. And they're like, well, that sort of looks mechanical and that's going to rob me of feel. Yeah. I see you sort of shrugging your shoulders. Yeah, come on.
Bring it on.
Yeah, bring it on. Off you go. Let's go.
Okay. So my answer is that what's more mechanical, a mousetrap or an analog watch? Which has the more moving parts? The mousetrap is less mechanical. The analog watch is more mechanical because it has more moving parts. And I say Bryson is less mechanical because he has fewer moving parts. He's more like the mousetrap. I'm more like the mousetrap. We are less mechanical. Sure, it looks that way because they've really never seen this before, but I just feel that it's actually less. We're a biomechanical machine. We're a biomachinery here, and if you're not controlling these moving parts, it requires a lot of attention, a lot of maintenance, a lot of practice to do this. And players are artistic. The players on the PGA Tour, highest level hand-eye coordination in the world. They're artists, and artists can make things happen that other people can't because of their high levels of hand-eye coordination. Yeah. And so the average player is looking at Jason Day, wanting to putt like him or something. Good luck.
Well, I want to just toss out a few modern day examples for you, and let this sort of be the bow on the conversation. And I want you to comment, please, Craig. I think if Crenshaw had that sort of long left arm off the shoulder look with the right side a little lower, to a large extent crouched over, Nicklaus was the same way. Modern day example of this would be Brad Faxon. And then here recently with the Masters 2022, Scotty Scheffler has got those long. Greg Norman did the same thing, would allow the arm to sort of hang out by his side and set the arm as long as possible. And Scheffler has some of the same look about him with both arms. But this is a good idea. But again, it's just touching the tip of the spear, the arm and the wrist, where you are stabilizing everything and you got sort of the same look about you.
Exactly. And you talk about long arms, and that's Steve Elkington. Steve has got long arms. And so I encouraged him, his comfort zone is to have a slight break in his elbow. That's just what he always used. And so, but he also would go with more straight arms and actually putted better, just didn't quite feel the same. And so, but he, as you mentioned at first, he did have that #1 ranking on the PGA Tour. That was the first year we worked together, his last full year on tour, and he made 471 consecutive 3-foot putts for number one. And then inside 5 feet, he was also in number one inside 5 feet. He had 595 attempts. He made 585 of those putts using Dynalign. So
look, I'm a recovering college golf coach. I announce golf on the PGA Tour. I used to teach golfers out there. Now I'm a volunteer coach for a high school golf team. And if I watch folks missing putts inside of 5 feet once, I see it thousands of times. And then you go through the rounds with them, and everyone's talking about power off the tee in the era in which we currently live. I'm like, folks, this is low-hanging fruit. If you just make putts from 5 feet inside, you clip your scores by 5, 6, 7, even more shots at times.
Yes, it's people want to they want to do what they see on TV, and they're focused on distance. But you think of, putting and full shots, we really have the opposite intention. In full shots, we want to maximize distance, so we maximize range of motion. In putting, distance is not our problem, so it just kind of makes sense that we want to minimize our range of motion and get some more stability, repeatability.
I have one more question, pardon me, because I know your time is precious. I personally am a big one. You talk about the arc of the stroke, and people think in terms of arc inward, back to the target line and inward. I love a blade to swing back and take off a little bit in the backswing, swing down, and then the follow through, take back off. I don't like putting strokes where the backswing is lower than the through swing. I feel like that leads to mishits. And a lot of folks, I believe, misunderstand, well, you've got to strike upwards on the ball to create a better roll. I like the blade to swing up in the backswing. As you set up here, you talked about where the pressure is in your fingers. How about in your feet? Because I know you're open. Are you pretty 50-50 to allow this thing to arc upward a bit?
I'm in the runner's stance, so it'll feel like I could step off and sprint. Mm-hmm. And so that's just providing a lot of stability. As far as the raising the putter back and raising going through, our radius is very stable on this stroke, so it is going to naturally raise. And that brings up another point that I see golfers pushing back on their trail shoulder before they putt, as they've got the putter here, that pushing back as a reminder to keep that shoulder back, because if the elbow extends or the shoulder comes out, then it's going to obviously change the radius, and we don't have to even we don't have to worry about that. So
wonderful, man. You're making it, at the outset you listen to this and it sounds like a lot, but actually it's a little, and it's awfully simple. And we had a guest here recently who talked about just fixing your body and fixing your posture. And among other folks, he worked with Antonio Brown, legendary wide receiver, and he called it cycling through the body and getting everything situated at the line of scrimmage. And Antonio would go knees, hips, chest, for argument's sake, and just get everything woken up and ready. It's basically the same thing here, just getting your body all organized properly, and then you pull the trigger.
Exactly. And people do think this is complicated, and it is. When you're learning this system, it can be complicated, depending on, some people are just not mechanically minded, so that makes it even harder. Mm-hmm. But once you learn this, it becomes a series of feels rather than thinking. I'm not thinking pronation, flexion, extension, ulnar deviation. I'm not thinking of those things. I'm feeling them. And that's what this becomes, a feel. So I can remain focused on my putt, and I'm going through the routine and I feel my setup. And so I'm not thinking of, it looks complicated, but once you learn it, as Elk said, it's not difficult. It's simple. It's a few steps, but it becomes second nature. It's just like putting it on an old pair of jeans. Once you get used to this, then you're just you fall right into it.
Well, if you're a good golfer, you do that at a dress for full shots anyway. And just poking some fun at my friend Bryson, he would name all, when he describes what he's doing, he names or uses all those terms. So it's smart. And he'd call the feel, he'd call that proprioception, just to make it sound.
Proprioception, well, of course, that's what it is.
Craig, you've been a star. It's such great stuff. I'm sure folks are going to want to find out more. Do you have a website or social media they can go and visit?
Yes, my website it's dynaligngolf.com. That's DYNALIGN golf.com. And on Instagram and Twitter, I'm at Dynalign Golf.
Fantastic.
I'm also one other thing. I do post a lot of videos now on a platform in the UK. It's called Recast App UK, and there's links in my bios for that. So all my I make a lot of videos, and so you can go see them there.
Well, I would be pretty confident that a number of folks are going to be watching these. Thanks for your time. Thanks for reaching out. It's fascinating stuff. And personal endorsement, I'm going to go and fiddle with this later this afternoon. So thank you very much.
My pleasure, Mark. Thank you.